The New York Giants' assembled coaching staff can best be described in one word: experienced. And here's why that matters a whole lot.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America. My name is Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody else in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants assistant coaching staff is now pretty much complete. And there's a common denominator amongst the coaches, which we will talk about in the first segment. We'll also take a look at why that matters, because it's going to matter a lot. And I'll explain why in the first segment. Then in segment two, there's been some talk about guys that the Giants should maybe look to move up via a trade. There's been about 4 names that have been thrown out there. We'll separate fact from fiction. Who realistically will bring something worth the return on investment versus who won't. So we'll break that down for you as well in segment 2. And then in segment 3, we're going to do a make the case scenario. And the case involves the Giants offensive line. So this is going to be an interesting exercise we'll go through. So again, welcome on into everybody. Let's get into today's show. All right. So the New York Giants assistant coaching staff is pretty much complete. We know now all the main players, if you will, the main names, the most recent of which Brian Callahan hired as the quarterback's coach. That was the last remaining major assistant or position coach opening that the Giants had to fill. You look at this coaching staff, and the one thing that it just absolutely screams out at you: experience. And I'm not talking about guys who have been 20-year coaching veterans who have worked, 18 of those years in the college ranks and 2 years in the NFL ranks. And no disrespect to the college coaches out there, but just about every single one of these Giants assistant coaches in the main position coaching groups have NFL experience, right? There's very few exceptions. Several of these assistant coaches have also played the game, whether it be at the NFL level or at the college level. And they have played the game at the position they are coaching in most cases, right? Which is another benefit. Because you always hear me talk about how when a guy has actually played the game and he's coaching the position that he played at, that just gives it a little bit more oomph, if you will, a little bit more credibility when you're trying to reach these young players who, otherwise would look at you and say, well, you never played, so how could you understand? All right. Also, the assistant coaches have had success in other spots that they have been in the NFL, right? Now, I have something on New York Giants on SI if you want to see the exact breakdown, because the breakdown is kind of long, so I don't want to use the whole show for the breakdown. But these guys, if you look at their bios and their past histories, particularly in the NFL level, they're accomplished, right? With very few exceptions. So that being said, here's why that experience matters. The Giants, as we know, they've got to hit the ground running in 2026. They could not afford to have novice coaches coming in, guys with, 2 or 3 years worth of experience, guys who had never worked at the NFL level. Because no disrespect, again, to college coaches, the NFL is a whole different ballgame. The NFL, the schemes, the techniques, a lot more detailed than what college coaches typically are able to get into with their student athletes. So that level of experience that this Giant coaching staff is bringing should allow for this 2026 Giants squad to hit the ground running. Now, also of note and also of importance here, you have heard me say on this show before that one of the biggest problems year in and year out with the Giants of late has been a lack of player development. We see it too many times. Guys come in and they're highly touted draft prospects and they don't do well. Or guys come in, they have a successful rookie season, and then by their second year, they hit the sophomore slump and they never come out of it. This coaching staff should alleviate that issue. You should see some of these guys that need to develop further start to develop because of the pedigree the staff has. All right. This coaching staff also will cut down on some of the player chaos that sometimes you see with young players. And I'm talking about young guys who come in and who, because they were the big man on campus in college, think that they can be the big man on campus in the NFL. And it doesn't work that way. And, I'm looking at you, Abdul Carter. I mean, Abdul Carter came in, kind of, marched to the beat of his own drum to begin with, didn't realize what it took to be a pro. And then when there was a coaching change made, he suddenly realized it and he played pretty well. So this staff, I believe, will not tolerate guys who show up to meetings late or skip practices or whatever, or don't go all out. Because John Harbaugh himself said it. He said it at his introductory press conference. If you're not coming in and if you don't love football and you're not willing to give everything you've got, you're not going to be here. And I believe he means it. And it doesn't matter if the player in question is $100 million free agent signing, a first-round draft pick, or whatever. I think, if somebody comes in and they think that they could coast because of their status, they will not be on this team. So in that regard, this coaching staff, starting with Harbaugh and funneled down to his assistants, they're going to establish an identity. And that identity is going to be one of selflessness. You come in, you do your job. This isn't about your stats. This isn't about your brand. This isn't about, your personal spotlight, if you will. This is about the team. A lot of coaches in the past, they've come in and they've talked about this, but they haven't delivered. This staff, I believe, will deliver. And that will be a key part of the foundation to getting this Giants team back to the playoffs. It's a key part of the foundation that has been missing for a number of years. We haven't really seen it. You can make a case going back to the Tom Coughlin era. You've had coaches that have either been way too lax or too stringent. John Harbaugh and this staff that he has assembled, I don't want to call it, A+ just yet, because obviously we have to see the results. But based on the criteria, based on the credentials these men bring, it's an A+ higher staff. Right? Not too many things that I think we can grapple about and say, oh, why did he do this or why didn't he do that? You've got a lot of guys on that staff who have played the positions they're going to coach. That makes a difference, in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to seeing how these coaches are going to bring out the best in the guys that they are charged with. Because, look, I'm tired of not seeing guys develop. I'm tired of all, the promise of these free agents to come in and whatnot, and these guys come in and they fizzle out, or the guys to walk out the door and they go on and they become better players. That's on coaching. That is why the Giants made the decision they made to upend the coaching and scrap it and start from scratch with John Harbaugh, who's a proven winner, who has a history of putting together good staffs. So we'll see what it brings. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit more than just the coaching staff. It's going to take execution. It's going to take staying healthy. It's going to take, studying and being selfless and all that other good stuff. But the foundation is there. And it's just a matter of, does it take root? Does it grow? And does it produce the results that everybody is hoping it will. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk giant trade chips. Some guys' names are floating out there. We'll separate fact from fiction because some of them just don't make sense. I'll tell you who, what, where, when, and why next. Hey, Giant fans, tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress and without the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction possible. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind in knowing that an expert is handling it. And for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in, if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th and take the taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, we're going to talk Giant trades. Now, the official trading period opens up on I think it's March 11th, which is the first day of the new league year. But right now, there's some speculation, will the Giants trade this guy or that guy, or should they trade this guy? And there were 4 names that I kept seeing popping up as potential trade chips, if you will. Some of them make sense, and some of them, I just don't know what these people are thinking, but we'll go through them, all right? The one that I think makes the most sense to look to move, but I'm going to put an asterisk here, which I'll tell you in a minute why, is outside linebacker Kayvon Thibodeaux. All right, now, if the Giants are looking to get back the 3rd-round pick that they gave up last year in the trade to move up to get Jackson Dart, I think Thibodeaux could bring that. I really do. Now, while I ordinarily would say, why create a hole on a roster? In this case, the Giants have Brian Burns. They've got Abdul Carter. They've got guys there. Then you throw in Chauncey Golston. Then you throw in, a possible defensive lineman, a big defensive lineman, which I am hoping the Giants will acquire. A big guy who can, handle or better handle some of those, mammoth offensive tackles. I could see that making sense, moving Thibodeaux, if you can accomplish that, but not before you accomplish that. So, look, for what it's worth, Thibodeaux, very good run defender. The pass rush hasn't been there, at least not since, I think, 2023, when he had double digits. Thibodeaux was a good player. He's young, but ultimately, look, he's going to want to get paid. And you move him off the roster, you save over $14 million, which again is not a lot compared to how it stacks up in terms of the highest paid edge rushers. But if you have an excess at a position, why not look to see if you can't move them and get draft picks? So to me, Thibodeaux makes the most sense to trade. Now, a guy who does not make sense to trade, and I think Bleacher Report actually suggested this, Dexter Lawrence. And their justification for trading Dexter Lawrence is he's sick of losing, he's frustrated, he probably wants a fresh start. Okay, first off, frustration and sick of losing, that's not a reason to trade a guy. I'm sorry, not a good reason. Fresh start, you've got a new coaching staff coming in, led by a guy who has won a Super Bowl, who knows what it takes to win. If that's not a fresh start, then tell me what is. All right, so I'm sorry. Dexter Lawrence, I don't see them trading him. I understand, yes, was Dexter frustrated last year? Absolutely. A lot of guys were. But is that enough of a reason to trade him? No, it is not. It is not. Sorry. He's part of that core. I don't think the Giants move him. Two others I'll mention. Running back Devin Singletary's name came up. Folks, I'm telling you right now, I don't see anybody trading for Devin Singletary. Not anything personal against Singletary, but he's got over a $5 million base salary, which a team would have to pick up. And unless he's going to be a bell cow, you're not paying that for a guy, and especially when you know the Giants are probably going to cut him, and you could probably get him for a lot less. I could see Devin Singletary potentially going to the Titans to reunite with Brian Daboll if he is cut by the Giants. But you're not going to trade him and get much, if anything, for him. So I don't see that happening. The other guy that was mentioned, and this one can go kind of either way. I don't think they'll trade him, but we'll discuss it anyway. And that's cornerback Deonte Banks. Now, it's no secret. Deonte Banks so far has not worked out. He falls under that category that I was talking about in the first segment of players who weren't developed. Now, for what it's worth, part of the player development is on the coaching. Part of it is on the player. The player's got to want to develop. Deonte Banks is now going to be on his third defensive backs coach since coming to the Giants. 3 strikes. I mean, I know you probably were saying 1 strike and you're out. 3 strikes and you're definitely out. Deonte Banks's option year of his rookie deal, that's not getting picked up. That much I can tell you. But you see if maybe he flourishes under this defensive system with the new defensive backfield coaches that he's going to have, with the new defensive coordinator. You see if maybe you can salvage something there. Because look, Deonte Banks is a pretty good kickoff returner. I think we could all agree with that. But as far as, playing cornerback, that still is a very big need for the Giants, one that they haven't filled. Paulson Adebo, he's not a bad cornerback, but I don't know that I would say he's a shutdown cornerback. At least he hasn't shown that. Then again, part of that has been due to injuries that he's dealt with. So, the thing with Deonte Banks for me is that he couldn't beat out Cordell Flott. Cordell Flott, a better player. Cordell Flott was not a first-round draft pick. So Cordell wanted the job more, and he worked at it, and to his credit, he got it. But Deonte Banks, what's frustrating about him, he's got the talent. He's got the physical tools. It's just what's between the ears and what's inside the chest that seems to be lacking. So I don't know. I don't know if, the Giants would get anything for him. I don't think they're going to trade him, to be honest with you. I think I remember reading somewhere that Joe Shane, in talking about Deonte Banks, said, I'm not giving up on him. But that's Joe Shane's opinion. What if John Harbaugh and his coaches say, we're giving up on him because we can't use him? I don't think that happens, but bottom line is I don't see Deonte Banks being traded. I'd be surprised if he was. And if he is traded, maybe they get a day 3 pick back. So in sum, if you're going to trade anybody in the hopes of getting back that 3rd round pick that you gave up to move up to get Jackson Dart, Thibodeau probably makes the most sense, because that's a guy that ultimately is going to want to get paid. And I don't know if the Giants are going to pony up for him, because by the time they have to do his contract, they're going to have to, make decisions on Malik Neighbors and whether to pick up his option year, which I expect they will. Abdul Carter will be a year after that. So, yeah, I don't see the Giants going all out to unless Denard Wilson can come up with a way to use all 3 of those guys at once at their strengths. And so far, that's kind of, not been the case. Still, creativity goes a long way. So maybe Denard Wilson has a few ideas how to get the best out of all 3. And hey, wouldn't it be nice if all 3 of them had double-digit sack seasons. That would be a great problem to have, but I don't think it'll happen. But, never say never. All right, coming up next, a make the case scenario. Should the Giants mess with the offensive line? This one's a hot topic, folks. Don't go anywhere. I'll tell you my thoughts on it right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're looking in for events that you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast. Speed skating races decided by inches. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympics experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there is no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, we're going to talk about mess with success, the Giants' offensive line. Now, the Giants' offensive line, I think we can all agree, last year, they played pretty well when they were all healthy. Probably the best we have seen from an offensive line group in I don't know how long. So, again, part of that was because they stayed healthy. Part of that, obviously, was the coaching. And part of that was just the general makeup of the line. All right, so you had Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor as your tackles. John Michael Schmitz took, steps forward in his development. And then Greg Van Roten was Mr. Steady, as he was the year before. And John Runyon Jr. started off, slow, but at least was healthy. So now the Giants are facing a bit of a dilemma, if you will. Van Roten and Illuminor are both set to hit free agency. What do? Do you bring them back? Because remember, when that line was constructed, they put a heavy emphasis on bringing in veterans. And really the only young player of the batch was Schmitz. All right? So Schmitz is not a young player anymore. He's now a veteran. And oh, by the way, there's some grumble out there, if you will, that maybe the Giants go for Tyler Linderbaum, which is the center for the Baltimore Ravens, who's going to hit free agency. I don't know that the Giants are going to be able to afford Linderbaum personally. But we'll see. We'll see if they're able to get him. And if they are, maybe they move Schmitz to guard, or maybe they just trade him. That being said, I'm getting off track a little bit here. So the Giants have a decision to make on that right side of the offensive line. Do they open up the checkbook for Jermaine Illuminor? Do they bring back Van Roten, who is in his mid-30s now, I think? Or do they go in a different direction? Here's what I think they're going to do. I think the reason why they drafted Marcus Bowe, who is a college right tackle, was with the idea that once Jermaine Illuminor's contract was up, move him over to that spot. You now have a key offensive lineman on a rookie deal instead of having to shell out big money for a veteran. A veteran who, by the way, was really good at pass blocking, but the run blocking, I would say, was pedestrian. Now, that also factors into what the Giants might do, because I believe the Giants are going to gravitate more to a ground and pound type of offense. That is what we saw in Baltimore, all right? I would not be surprised if that's what comes up here with the Giants, to where that run game becomes, the focal point. The passing game will be important too, don't get me wrong, but the run game has kind of been shoved to the backdrop, if you will, of late, the last several years, because everybody's like, oh, passing league, we got to have, the next greatest show on turf, that sort of thing. I don't think that will be the Giants' identity on offense. So You look at the scenario here and you say, okay, maybe Jermaine Illuminor not going to fit into what we want to do financially speaking. Van Roten's a good player. He's sturdy. He rarely misses a snap. That alone is worth something. But you know what? According to Pro Football Focus, Van Roten and Illuminor were the second and third best pass blockers on the Giants' starting offensive line, but the third and fourth best run blockers on the starting offensive line. Van Roten third, Illuminor fourth. Marcus Bowe is a little bit better of a run blocker. So I could see it making sense to say, all right, Jermaine, we love you. We appreciate all you did, but we got to go in a different direction, because that's why they drafted Marcus Bowe. Now, here's what's really interesting, though, about the Giants' offensive line, and I think a decision that nobody's really talking about, but I'm going to mention it, and that's what to do at left guard with Jon Runyan Jr. Jon Runyan Jr. was, according to Pro Football Focus, the weakest link on the Giants' offensive line, both in terms of run blocking and pass pro. Now, how much of that was because, in the beginning of the year, Jon Runyan Jr. was still recovering from the shoulder issue that he had last season, or not last season, in 2024? That's something you take into consideration. But, the bottom line is this. Jon Runyan Jr. is in the final year of his deal. He has no more guaranteed money. He would count for $11.75 million against the cap, of which, if he were to be cut, they would save $9.25 million, all right, and just take a $2.5 million dead money hit. If you're going to potentially lose Illuminor and put Marcus Bowe in there, which is what I think is going to happen, if you're going to say, all right, you know what, Greg, we like you, but, we want you back, but not as a starter, okay, that means you would have a new right side. Do you want to add to that Runyan? Or do you want to just say, all right, we'll just leave it as is? Now, my feeling is this. You could put me next to Andrew Thomas, and he would probably make me look good, okay? I'd have to gain, obviously, a few more pounds, but Andrew Thomas just, when you play next to a guy like that, that's a guy who's just, pretty good. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that would be an area to keep an eye on, because ultimately, look, let's be real. The Giants, they need to address the interior of the offensive line. That's probably the bigger priority right now. That doesn't mean that tackles should be ignored, because again, if Marcus Bowe does take over as the starting right tackle, now you need a swing tackle, because James Hudson ain't going to be that guy. He's going to be a cap hit. I'm pretty sure of that. So what I'm getting at, though, is the best ingredient for a successful offensive line is continuity. And the Giants, it looks like they're not going to have that this year. Is that a bad thing? Well, it could be. But here's the other thing. The Giants also have a new offensive line coach, an assistant offensive line coach. So maybe that's not going to be as big of a problem as it maybe seems initially. But we'll find out, obviously. A lot of football still to come up. Spring football, starting in early April. And of course, we'll see how the draft shapes up. Maybe there'll be a young offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman that they fall in love with. Maybe they do get Tyler Linderbaum. I don't know. A lot of unanswered questions right now, but that's certainly something to keep an eye on, because that offensive line, it all starts and ends with that offensive line, as we all know. So we'll see how they play it. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Thank you for making Locked On Giants part of your day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you're a true diehard New York Giants fan, check out our everydayer all access level. Perks include exclusive texting access with me, all access episodes, a daily newsletter, a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store, a weekly video call invitation for the group, access to our growing Discord community, and a whole lot more. Head on over to lockedonnygiants.supercast.com to join the Everydayer program and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. All right, Giant fans, that does it for me. I will see you tomorrow on an all-new episode of Locked On Giants.